Chapter 331, An ancient zombie. These graves and the tombstones must have been there for a long time, and the inscriptions on them had become blurry. Looking at these graves, Yili couldn't help but think of the West Mountain burial mound, where there were also a lot of graves. Yili wondered if the Heart of Darkness was in these graves. Could it be that he had to dig up each of these graves one by one? Yili pondered for a few seconds, realizing that this might be the only way. Just as he was about to start, a black light appeared not far away. Following the black light, Yili found it peculiar and decided to walk towards it. After just a few steps, the black light slowly rose. Yili stared at the black light, feeling somewhat stunned. The Heart of Darkness? Inside this black light was a heart that was still beating, looking extremely strange. After a few seconds of observation, Yili was certain that the heart within this black light was indeed the Heart of Darkness. Immediately, Yili reached out with a hand, ready to grab hold of the Heart of Darkness. However, it seemed like the Heart of Darkness wanted to evade, but it couldn't escape Yili's grasp. The Heart of Darkness was firmly seized by Yili and continued to beat incessantly. Just as Yili was about to examine the Heart of Darkness carefully, suddenly, countless desolate graves cracked open. Hands emerged from the graves, and if an ordinary person were here, they would likely have been scared to death. The creatures coming out of the graves, although they were also zombies, were somewhat different from the ones Yili had encountered before. That was because these zombies were all wearing armor and wielding spears. Could they be ancient soldiers? Roar! Roar! Hundreds of ancient zombies howled as if they were feeling the joy of seeing daylight again. A few seconds later, Yili understood. These ancient zombies must have been infected by the Heart of Darkness to become zombies. This place must have been where the ancient soldiers were buried, and the reason they emerged from their graves was probably because he had captured the Heart of Darkness. These were just ordinary zombies, and Yili found it strange but didn't feel threatened at all. The hundreds of ancient zombies naturally noticed Yili, and they charged towards him like thirsty people in the desert suddenly finding water. Roar! Roar! Yili raised his finger, and golden spiritual light began to wrap around it. Then, he fired it like a machine gun. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With countless sounds of breaking wind, over 100 ancient zombies fell to the ground. Yili wanted to examine the Heart of Darkness he held in his hand, but he never expected that there would be someone else. Swish! Suddenly, a cold light flashed in the air. Yili naturally dodged, feeling bewildered. Could there be traps or ambushes here? As he looked ahead, his face lit up. Standing 10 steps away from him was a zombie, a third-tier zombie wearing golden armor and wielding a huge halberd. This zombie was as tall as Ada and looked extremely imposing, looking like an unrivaled fierce general who used to charge into battle in ancient times. At first glance, Yili knew that this zombie would be the 7th one he would cultivate. Suddenly, the zombie lunged at Yili. In Yili's opinion, a Tier 3 zombie could be defeated with a single finger. He raised his finger and activated the One Yang finger. This zombie instantly lost its combat power. Chapter 332, Zombie Long Yu. This ancient zombie was a third-tier zombie. Yili checked the system space and found that there was a third-tier male zombie in there, which had just been synthesized using the members of the Golden Wind exploration team. He opened the synthesis grid in his mind and dragged the third-tier male zombie onto the ancient zombie. The ancient zombie transformed into a 4th-tier zombie. Master! The ancient zombie awkwardly called out to Yili. Yili thought he should give this zombie a name. What should he call it? After a few seconds of contemplation, Yili came up with a name. How about Long Yu? From now on, I'll call you Long Yu, Yili said slowly to the ancient zombie. Yes, Master, Long Yu replied respectfully. Now he had cultivated another zombie, and the Apocalypse Legion had a total of 7 zombies. But now, Yili looked at the Heart of Darkness in his hand. According to legend, this black heart was the heart of a 10th-tier dark race member left behind after death. Without much thought, Yili swallowed the heart of darkness in one gulp. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring the S-level skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. Congratulations to the host for upgrading the Ancient Devil Tome to the 4th level. Congratulations to the host for becoming a 9th-tier evolved being. Hiss. Just as Yili expected, he acquired a new skill and had unexpected surprises. The Ancient Devil Tome was upgraded to the 4th level, and he had become a 9th-tier evolved being. Now that he was a Tier 9 evolved being, plus the 4th level of the Ancient Devil Tome, if he fought the Tier 9 Crazy Bull and the Tier 9 Skeleton Undead again, they would definitely die. Now, there's a new member. Yutong nibbled on her finger. He looks quite handsome, hee. Bai Wawa giggled. But it seems like he's only a 4th-tier zombie, Alda said. Yili smiled, don't worry. Long you will soon be at your level. Now, it was time to take revenge. Yili smiled faintly. He was very unhappy that the Tier 9 Crazy Bull and heavy sword-wielding undead had escaped. With the Apocalypse Legion stored in the system space, he walked out of the Dark Land. He originally thought the Dark Land was very dangerous, but it seemed it was just so. He didn't know where the 9th-tier Crazy Bull and heavy sword-wielding undead had fled to, so he had to find out. After thinking for a few seconds, he decided to go to the Abyssal Gorge to inquire. Activating his swift steps, he arrived at the Abyssal Gorge. After jumping down the abyss, Yili reached the entrance of the underground palace. Outside the underground palace, there were a dozen 3rd-tier heavy sword-wielding undead guarding it. They were originally discussing something, but when they saw Yili approaching, they were all frightened out of their wits. Duh! Demon King Yili. The scene where Yili had displayed the 3 unparalleled strikes outside the underground palace last time was something they would never forget. Let your new leader come out and see me, Yili said slowly. As soon as the dozen 3rd-tier heavy sword-wielding undead heard this, they didn't dare to hesitate and all rushed inside. Before long, all the heavy sword-wielding undead came out, led by an 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. Demon King Yili, do you really think my heavy sword-wielding undead tribe is easy to bully? The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead stared at Yili fiercely. The entire heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was in shock, and they naturally knew how terrifying Yili was. I'm not here to exterminate you. Don't worry, Yili said indifferently. When these words came out, the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was all stunned. He wasn't here to exterminate them. Demon King Yili, since you're not here to destroy us, what are you here for? The level 8 heavy sword-wielding undead stared at Yili. Chapter 333, King Kong Ape Tribe, hee. I go wherever I want. Who can stop me? Yili looked indifferently at the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was taken aback. Demon King Yili, what do you want? I want to know what major forces are present within the inner area of the Falling Rock Mountain Range, aside from the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe and the crazy bulls, Yili said slowly. The heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was surprised by Yili's unexpected question. In the inner area of the Falling Rock Mountain Range, besides the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe, there is also the King Kong Ape Tribe, the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead replied. Although he didn't know why Yili was asking this, he knew that if he didn't answer, the consequences would be beyond his imagination. Yili thought that the 9th-tier Crazy Bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead might have fled to the King Kong Ape Tribe. How do I get to the King Kong Ape Tribe? Yili continued to inquire. It's to the south of the Abyssal Gorge, just keep going, the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead answered. Immediately, Yili leaped into the air and left the underground palace. The entire heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was left baffled. They never expected Yili to just leave like that. After leaving the Abyssal Gorge, Yili activated his swift steps and headed south. At night, Yili suddenly saw a red light descending from the sky, like a meteor falling. It didn't take long for it to emit a deafening explosion. Yili thought it might be a meteor and didn't think much of it. He continued to use his Godspeed steps towards the territory of the King Kong ape tribe. Outside the territory of the King Kong ape tribe, Yili spotted a few King Kong apes whispering to each other. King Kong apes were tall creatures, and the higher their tier, the taller they were. The few he saw were all at the third tier, standing at around 2 meters tall. There was a huge explosion last night, and now the leader and the tribe's elites have gone to the site. The leader seems to suspect that a shocking spiritual treasure fell from the sky. I feel it must be a shocking spiritual treasure. The leader of the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe and the leader of the crazy bull tribe have also gone. Yili was at a distance from the few third-tier King Kong apes, and their voices were very faint, but his hearing was exceptionally sharp, so he heard everything clearly. He walked over and wanted to ask about the location of the incident. He initially thought it was a meteor, but now it seemed to be something else. As the few third-tier King Kong apes were speaking, they suddenly noticed a young man approaching them. They were stunned and then rubbed their eyes because they couldn't believe their eyes. A human had actually appeared before them. However, no matter how hard they rubbed their eyes, there was still a young man standing before them. Suddenly, the few third-tier King Kong apes burst into uncontrollable laughter. Ha ha ha, a human. It's actually a human. Immediately, the few third-tier King Kong apes hurried over to Yili. Human, are you lost? One of the third-tier King Kong apes asked Yili. Lost? Yili smiled faintly. Why waste time talking to this human? It's been so long since I've had human flesh, one of the third-tier King Kong apes said. With that, one of the third-tier King Kong apes pounced at Yili. As the saying goes, natural disasters can be survived, but self-inflicted sins are unforgivable. Yili had only wanted to ask a few questions, but these third-tier King Kong apes seemed to insist on choosing their own fate. He had no choice but to oblige them. Chapter 334, Half of the Eastern Emperor Bel. A third-tier King Kong ape rushed at Yili, but in Yili's eyes, third-tier King Kong apes were as insignificant as dust. Activating his heavenly spirit eye, a shocking golden light shot straight from his eyes. The third-tier King Kong ape that had charged at Yili was instantly pierced through and fell heavily to the ground. What? This. The other few third-tier King Kong apes widened their eyes, unable to believe what had just happened. They were in a state of shock. Yili smiled indifferently. In his eyes, these were just ants. How could they understand his true power? Yili calmly approached the other few third-tier King Kong apes, his face expressionless. Seeing Yili approaching, the few third-tier King Kong apes backed away as if seeing a ghost coming to claim their lives, unable to stop retreating. Human, what do you want? We are the King Kong ape tribe, one of the third-tier King Kong apes said. Yili shook his head inwardly, wondering why there were always so many lowly flies threatening him. Speak up, where did your leader go? Yili asked slowly. The few third-tier King Kong apes were puzzled, not understanding why Yili was asking this question. Oh, our leader went to the strange stone forest, one of the third-tier King Kong apes answered in fear. The strange stone forest? This was the first time Yili had heard of this name. Just keep going east from here until you see a stone forest. That's the strange stone forest, the King Kong ape explained. Yili nodded and then looked at the few third-tier King Kong apes. Do you have any last words? Yili asked calmly. He had only intended to ask a few questions, but these few third-tier King Kong apes insisted on seeking their own doom. What else could he do? When the Tier 3 King Kong apes heard Yili's words, they were horrified. We are from the King Kong ape tribe. If you dare to do anything to us, you will definitely. The words of this King Kong ape were never finished because a terrifying blood hole appeared on its forehead, and it would never have the chance to finish speaking. The other two third-tier King Kong apes saw this and tried to flee. But how could they escape? Swoosh swoosh. With two wind-breaking sounds, the two escaping third-tier King Kong apes were dead. After retracting his finger, Yili activated his swift steps and headed east. It didn't take long for Yili to see a vast stone forest. This stone forest was incredibly large, with strange rocks everywhere. There were standing rocks like blades and reclining rocks like tigers. Using his heavenly spirit eye, Yili saw a trace of smoke rising from the center of the strange stone forest. Suddenly, a cold smile appeared on Yili's face. There were the 9th-tier crazy bull, the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and a giant King Kong ape that was at least 8 meters tall, followed by dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes. Among them, there was a strange bell, entirely red in color, with peculiar patterns on it. But the bell was only half, and the other half was missing. Looking at this bell, Yili couldn't help but shudder all over. Could it be one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell? Even though it was only half, it was enough to make people feel suffocated. The 9th-tier crazy bull, 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and 9th-tier King Kong ape all wanted to lift this half of the bell, but even if they exerted all their strength, they couldn't move it. Yili walked over. If this really was half of the Eastern Emperor Bell, then he had hit the jackpot coming to the Falling Rock Mountain range this time. Chapter 335, A Human, What on Earth is this? Even I, a crazy bull, can't lift it. The 9th-tier crazy bull angrily exclaimed. Don't just blame yourself. Even I can't lift it. The 9th-tier King Kong ape said. The 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead thought for a moment and then said, this bell is only half, but it's so heavy. Could it really be a priceless treasure? They also suspected it might be a treasure, but what kind of treasure is only half a bell? Suddenly, the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to remember something, and he stared in shock at the half-bell. Could this be one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell? As soon as these words were spoken, not only the 9th-tier crazy bull and King Kong ape, but all the high-leveled King Kong apes were also shocked. The Eastern Emperor Bell? After careful consideration, they realized how astonishingly possible this was. It descended from the sky and was so heavy. Ha, Brother Skeleton, this might really be half of the Eastern Emperor Bell. The King Kong ape burst into laughter. We must try to move this Eastern Emperor Bell. The 9th-tier crazy bull also laughed. After a few laughs from the King Kong ape, he suddenly remembered something and looked at the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, saying, that Demon King, Yili. As soon as the words, Demon King Yili, were spoken by the King Kong ape, the faces of the 9th-tier crazy bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead instantly darkened. Demon King Yili, his Apocalypse Legion is all 6th-tier zombies. We are no match for them. A few seconds later, the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to lose his energy, his voice filled with helplessness. The 9th-tier crazy bull also felt somewhat helpless. Although he had boasted in the ruined city, saying things like, let's wait and see, he was just bluffing it. Since then, he had become afraid of Yili, deeply afraid. I think you're giving too much credit to that human, undermining your own confidence. Even if Demon King Yili and his Apocalypse Legion are strong, our King Kong ape tribe is not to be trifled with. The 9th-tier King Kong ape said disdainfully. The 9th-tier crazy bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead exchanged a glance and gave a bitter smile. They had thought the same thing before, but the results were self-evident. Don't worry, as long as Demon King Yili and his Apocalypse Legion dare to appear in front of me, one will make them understand what fear is. For now, let's get this half of the Eastern Emperor Bell out. The 9th-tier King Kong ape said. The other high-leveled King Kong apes also smiled coldly. They were used to being dominant in the Falling Rock Mountain range. Who cared about Demon King Yili and his Apocalypse Legion? At this moment, a 6th-tier King Kong ape looked in a certain direction. Huh? The 6th-tier King Kong ape was stunned for a moment and thought he might have seen it wrong. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, and indeed, there was a young male human slowly approaching. A human. The sixth-tier King Kong ape pointed in a certain direction and exclaimed. The ninth-tier King Kong ape, the ninth-tier Crazy Bull, the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and the other high-leveled heavy sword-wielding undead immediately followed the direction pointed. When they saw this, the ninth-tier King Kong ape and dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were all stunned. But the pupils of the ninth-tier Crazy Bull suddenly contracted. As for the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, who had no eyes, he took 3 steps back, and his entire skeleton seemed to be on the verge of falling apart. Demon King Yi Li. The ninth-tier Crazy Bull shouted. The ninth-tier King Kong ape and dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were also shocked. The Demon King. Yi Li. Chapter 336, I'm here for 2 things. The ninth-tier King Kong ape widened his eyes. He had heard the name, Demon King Yi Li, dozens of times in the past few days, but now he was finally seeing the real person. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was an absolute king in the Falling Rock mountain range, even stronger than the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. In recent days, the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had been bragging about how formidable Demon King Yi Li was when they were around him. They said that Demon King Yi Li possessed 2 ancient divine weapons, the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. They also mentioned how terrifying Demon King Yi Li's Apocalypse Legion was. They spoke of the fist god zombie Aada, the iron-footed zombie Baiwawa, the ice zombie Hongye. From the words of the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, it was not difficult to hear that Demon King Yi Li was an unparalleled force. As the absolute ruler of the Falling Rock mountain range, the ninth-tier King Kong ape had heard more than enough of this praise for Demon King Yi Li. The ninth-tier King Kong ape looked coldly at Demon King Yi Li, and a faint smile crossed his lips. So, you are Demon King Yi Li. The high-leveled King Kong apes also examined Demon King Yi Li, wanting to know who he was and why he had made the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead so afraid. After all, they were all ninth-tier dark race members. Demon King Yi Li stopped in his tracks and calmly looked at the ninth-tier King Kong ape. He replied, "That's right, 1 a.m. Demon King Yi Li." The ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead exchanged glances because the psychological trauma inflicted upon them by Yi Li was incredibly great, something they would never forget in their lifetimes. The ninth-tier King Kong ape smiled coldly and said, "Demon King Yi Li, you've been making quite a few waves in the Falling Rock mountain range recently." It had been a long time since there had been such a tumultuous event in the Falling Rock mountain range. It had always been the King Kong ape tribe, the Crazy Bull tribe, and the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe. Yi Li's appearance changed the layout of the Falling Rock mountain range drastically. "It's not a big deal. To me, it's just a small matter," Yi Li replied nonchalantly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape's expression turned cold as he stared at Yi Li. "Demon King Yi Li, do you really think you can run rampant in the Falling Rock mountain range?" The ninth-tier King Kong ape stood at a towering height of 8 meters, resembling a dragon with well-developed limbs and a simple mind. However, the ninth-tier King Kong ape was by no means as simple-minded as he appeared. Since Demon King Yi Li had managed to make the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead so afraid, Yi Li must have some strength. "I'm here for 2 things, Yi Li said calmly. "Firstly, I came to kill the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. They escaped last time, and I'm not happy about it. Secondly, I want this half of the Eastern Emperor Bell. But I've changed my mind now." Seeing how terrified the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead are of me, one decide not to kill them. Yi Li spoke slowly. Being feared by others was much better than being respected, a timeless truth. "Demon King Yi Li, are you really this arrogant?" The ninth-tier King Kong ape couldn't contain his anger. Yi Li smiled faintly and spoke slowly, 1 word at a time, "Yes, I have always been this arrogant." Silence, a deathly silence. "Yi Li, you really won't kill us?" A few seconds later, the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was the first to break the silence. Of course not. If I say I won't kill you, then I won't kill you, Yili replied indifferently. Chapter 337, Say what you want to say. The ninth-tier crazy bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, upon hearing this, exchanged glances, as if communicating with their eyes. After a few seconds, they gritted their teeth and nodded heavily. Very well then, well leave. With that, the ninth-tier crazy bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead departed from the area. Come back. What are you doing? Come back. Come back. The ninth-tier King Kong ape shouted loudly at their retreating figures, but the ninth-tier crazy bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to pay no attention at all and didn't even turn their heads. Upon seeing this, dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were left in disbelief. Were they really scared away just like that? Yili had always thought of himself as neither a good person nor a bad person, and he didn't need to explain his actions to anyone. What about you? Yili looked at the ninth-tier King Kong ape and asked calmly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was momentarily stunned, then he glared fiercely at Yili. Demon King Yili, what do you want? Yili smiled and said, if you want to die, or if your King Kong ape tribe wants to be exterminated, then come over. If you don't want that, then get lost. With these words, the ninth-tier King Kong ape's body shook. It had been many years. How many years since he had heard someone speak to him like this? Demon King Yi Li. The ninth-tier King Kong ape gritted his teeth, his voice cold and resentful. Yili chuckled and thought that this ninth-tier King Kong ape was trying to display his dominance and anger. However, how could he dare to show anger in front of him? Let me say it again, die or get lost. I don't want to say it a third time, Yili said calmly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape's anger flared up, and he pounded his own chest hard, letting out a roar. Demon King Yili, I'm gonna kill you. With that, the ninth-tier King Kong ape charged at Yili, and his huge body made the earth tremble. Yili looked a bit bored. After all, this ninth-tier King Kong ape was just a single individual, far from being a match for him. Then, Yili released his Apocalypse Legion from the system space. However, he didn't release Long Yu, as Long Yu was only a fourth-tier zombie. Bai Wawa, Hongye, Yutong, Swordsman All Chi, and Bone Maiden. 6 ninth-tier zombies. The ninth-tier King Kong ape, upon seeing this, stopped in his tracks and stared wide-eyed, the largest his eyes had ever been in history. The ninth-tier crazy bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had told him more than 10 times that Demon King Yili's Apocalypse Legion had 6 ninth-tier zombies, but he had never taken it seriously. Now, 6 ninth-tier zombies were right in front of him. This. The ninth-tier King Kong ape couldn't believe his eyes, and the scene before him left him gasping for breath. Dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were already scared out of their wits. 6 ninth-tier zombies. They hadn't even heard of such a thing before. Come here and let my Apocalypse Legion see what you're capable of, Yili said calmly to the ninth-tier King Kong ape. Where could the ninth-tier King Kong ape still dare to attack? These were 6 ninth-tier zombies. Demon King Yili, this is unfair. The ninth-tier King Kong ape steadied his emotions and stared at Yili. Yili was taken aback for a moment. Could it be that this ninth-tier King Kong ape still had something to say? This was interesting. Say what you want to say, Yili said calmly. Chapter 338, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. The ninth-tier King Kong ape stared at Yili and spoke coldly. Demon King Yili, one know you're strong, but right now, I'm not at my full strength. Yili smiled, oh. How can you show your true strength then? My King Kong ape tribe's army has not arrived yet, Demon King Yili. If you're truly daring, do you dare let me call for reinforcements? The ninth-tier King Kong ape said. Yili shook his head inwardly. The act of decapitating an enemy general from among thousands of troops was something he had done many times since he transmigrated to this parallel world. This 9th-tier King Kong ape was already doomed, so why not agree to his request? Go ahead, Yili said calmly. With these words, not only the 9th-tier King Kong ape but also dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes couldn't help but be delighted. Suddenly, the 9th-tier King Kong ape shouted loudly, "Send the signal." As he spoke, a 6th-tier King Kong ape sent out a signal unique to the King Kong ape tribe. Like an arrow piercing through the clouds, thousands of troops came to meet. In no time at all, the earth began to shake violently. Countless King Kong apes rushed over, as if a dark tide was pressing down, completely surrounding Yili and his Apocalypse Legion. The 9th-tier King Kong ape's face began to glow with excitement because Yili still had the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. If he could obtain them, his strength would increase by several levels, and he would no longer have to submit to the wilderness zone. Demon King Yili, I really admire you. The 9th-tier Crazy Bull and the 9th-tier Heavy Sword-wielding Undead praised you so much that I thought you were very clever, the 9th-tier King Kong ape said smugly. Yili's face remained unchanged. He spoke slowly, in the Falling Rock mountain range, only one kind of person will die, and that is the foolish one. The dark race is no exception. The 9th-tier King Kong ape was taken aback and then roared in anger after a few seconds, Demon King Yili, why are you not afraid at this point? Yili and his Apocalypse Legion were surrounded by his King Kong ape tribe. As long as he gave the order, Yili and his Apocalypse Legion would likely be wiped out in an instant. He couldn't understand why Yili was so indifferent. This was not just a few hundred King Kong apes, there were tens of thousands of them. Do you think I need to be afraid? Yili looked at the 9th-tier King Kong ape calmly. The 9th-tier King Kong ape gritted his teeth and became incredibly angry. He had never been this furious from birth until now. In that case, I'll let you die. Kill Demon King Yili and his Apocalypse Legion. With the 9th-tier King Kong ape's order, countless King Kong apes rushed toward Yili. Capturing the leader first was an old but eternal principle, and it was the same in this case. Yili gave an order to his Apocalypse Legion to attack the 9th-tier King Kong ape. In an instant, all 6 9th-tier zombies from the Apocalypse Legion leaped into the air and attacked the 9th-tier King Kong ape. Yili retrieved the dragon-slaying blade from the system space. These ignorant King Kong apes dared to surround him, so he would give them a taste of his blade first. Suddenly, Yili seemed to remember something. When he was in the dark zone, he had absorbed the Heart of Darkness and gained a skill that he hadn't practiced yet, so he decided to give it a try. Ding! Does the host want to practice the S-level attack skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique? Yes. Practicing the S-level attack skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. 10%. 30%. 60%. 100%. Practicing of the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique completed. Chapter 339, The situation is hopeless. The system's prompt sounded in Yili's mind. A slight smile appeared at the corner of Yili's mouth, and a wicked grin played on his face. King Kong apes from all directions were only a few steps away from him. He leaped into the air and activated the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome. The demonic energy from the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome was incredibly dense, and the sky became shrouded in dark clouds. Now, as a 9th-tier evolved being, coupled with the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome, he knew how strong he had become without even needing to think about it. The King Kong apes were all horrified. They had never experienced such a suffocating feeling. Yili raised the dragon-slaying demon blade high and slowly uttered, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. As he spoke, a formidable demon god phantom wielding a giant blade launched an attack with incredible speed. Boom! Instantly, a deafening explosion rocked the earth. The King Kong apes had not yet recovered, and they didn't know how many were dead or injured. Yili considered that the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade technique was not as powerful as the Primordial Demon Slash yet. After all, the Primordial Demon Slash was an SSS level skill, while the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade technique was only an S level skill. Just as the countless King Kong apes were recovering from the shock and looking at Yili in horror in mid-air, Yili raised the dragon-slaying blade again. Primordial Demon Slash. As he spoke, the blade fell heavily. 3,000 terrifying demonic phantoms attacked, moving at the speed of lightning. Another earth-shattering explosion shook the ground and caused it to tremble. Yili smiled faintly as he looked at Alda and the others, who were still engaged in battle, while the 9th-tier King Kong ape watched coldly. Yili activated the swift steps in mid-air and left behind only an afterimage in place. Swish! A terrifying cold light struck the ground instantly, bisecting dozens of King Kong apes. The 9th-tier King Kong ape watched Yili approach, inexplicably filled with fear. Quick! Stop Demon King Yili! Unfortunately, Yili was like a martial arts hero from a Chinese TV series. He was literally flying in the air. Yili used the swift steps and disappeared from his original position once again. A cold glint appeared first, followed by a slash like a dragon. Yili swung the dragon-slaying blade horizontally, and the terrifying blade aura struck toward the 9th-tier King Kong ape. The 9th-tier King Kong ape was horrified. Although he had formidable defenses, this was the dragon-slaying blade, one of the 10 great divine weapons. It was said to be able to cut through the heavens, let alone him. The 9th-tier King Kong ape quickly dodged, narrowly avoiding Yili's attack. He looked at the scene before him. While the King Kong ape tribe still had many King Kong apes, they couldn't rescue him as the Apocalypse Legion blocked the way. The 9th-tier King Kong ape knew that the situation was hopeless and decided to escape. Unfortunately, in Yili's eyes, the 9th-tier King Kong ape was already a dead man. If he could escape from Yili's hands, he would be the first person Yili admired. However, Yili would never have anyone he admired. He didn't have one now, and he wouldn't have one in the future. Yili activated the swift steps and swiftly launched an attack. The escape speed of a 9th-tier Dark Race member was fast, but it depended on whom they were trying to outrun. Compared to Yili's swift steps, the speed at which the Tier 9 King Kong ape escaped was not worth mentioning. In an instant, Yili had caught up with the Tier 9 King Kong ape. Yili stood in front of the 9th-tier King Kong ape, looking at him with a faint smile. Do you want to escape? Chapter 340, Death of the 9th-tier King Kong ape. The 9th-tier King Kong ape was horrified. He never expected Yili to catch up with him so quickly. Demon King Yili, you, the 9th-tier King Kong ape's words were interrupted by Yili. I already gave you chance earlier, but you didn't cherish it. I have no choice. Yili said indifferently. Hearing this, the 9th-tier King Kong ape's expression turned cold. As the ruler of the Falling Stone Mountain Range, when had he been pushed to such a desperate situation? Demon King Yili, do you really want to exterminate me? We have no deep-seated enmity. The 9th-tier King Kong ape stared at Yili. Yili smiled faintly. This is how one do things. There's no need for reasons. Accept your fate. As he spoke, Yili raised the dragon-slaying blade and swung it horizontally. A cold radiance shot towards the 9th-tier King Kong ape. The 9th-tier King Kong ape roared in anger and thrust out a punch with tremendous power. The space seemed to shatter from the force. Boom! The cold radiance of the dragon-slaying blade collided with the 9th-tier King Kong ape's punch. Swish! Yili activated the swift steps, leaving behind only an afterimage. The 9th-tier King Kong ape, seeing this, widened his eyes and quickly searched for Yili's figure. When Yili appeared again, he was already behind the 9th-tier King Kong ape. Before the King Kong ape could react, the dragon-slaying blade had pierced towards his back. In a battle between experts, every move was deadly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape had formidable defenses, but in front of the dragon-slaying blade, his impressive defenses were insignificant. The ninth-tier King Kong ape let out a horrified scream, blood spurted out continuously, and the scene could not be described with just one word: grim. The ninth-tier King Kong ape used all his strength to turn around, his eyes locked onto Yi Li. He clenched his fist, and an aura of malevolence enveloped it, as if he wanted to take Yi Li down with him. Suddenly, the ninth-tier King Kong ape's fist, filled with malevolence, struck heavily. This was his all-out attack. However, Yi Li's speed was incredibly fast. He activated the swift steps, and the ninth-tier King Kong ape's all-out attack couldn't even touch him. Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. Yi Li leaped into the air, raising the dragon-slaying blade high and releasing the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. A peerless demon god rushed towards the ninth-tier King Kong ape with great force. The King Kong ape had already exhausted all his strength with his previous attack. At this moment, the ninth-tier King Kong ape had no chance of withstanding this peerless demon god. Boom! The peerless demon god crashed into the ninth-tier King Kong ape's body. The ninth-tier King Kong ape died instantly, and vanished. At this moment, Ada and the others were still in the midst of a fierce battle, and the strange stone forest was already soaked with blood. Yi Li pondered for a few seconds and then kicked the body of the ninth-tier King Kong ape. The King Kong ape's body was sent flying onto the battlefield, creating a deep crater on impact. The high-leveled and low-leveled King Kong apes watched, stunned. Yi Li came with his blade. He walked very fast as flying. The King Kong apes panicked. They didn't want to seek revenge for their leader. Instead, they wanted to escape. Primordial Demon Slash. 3,000 divine and demonic phantoms suddenly attacked, moving at the speed of lightning. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion resounded. The remaining King Kong apes finally began to scatter in all directions, wishing they had more legs to run faster. Yi Li didn't pursue them. He had no interest in these King Kong apes. He looked towards the crimson bell not too distant. Chapter 341, Leaving the Wilderness Zone. Yi Li walked up to the half of the crimson bell in front of him. It was not a complete bell, but only half of it, with strange patterns on the surface. He speculated that this should be the Eastern Emperor Bell. Even the ninth-tier King Kong ape, the ninth-tier Crazy Bull, and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead combined couldn't move this crimson bell. Ding! Detected a fragment of one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell. Please pick it up, host. The system's voice suddenly appeared in Yi Li's mind. Yi Li's face lit up. It was just as he had expected. This was indeed one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell, even though it was only half of it. After placing the dragon-slaying blade into the system space, Yi Li placed his hands on the fragment of the Eastern Emperor Bell and lifted it upwards. This half of the Eastern Emperor Bell was instantly lifted, and Yi Li smiled, realizing how strong he was. Since this was only half of the Eastern Emperor Bell, it couldn't be touched or tested. After placing the fragments of the Eastern Emperor Bell into the system space, the system's voice once again appeared in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a chance to randomly draw a prize. Would you like to use it? Yes. Immediately, the virtual pointer began to spin in the roulette and stopped after a few seconds. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a super treasure map. Yi Li's face brightened. He had obtained another super treasure map. His luck was truly extraordinary. Open it. After opening the super treasure map, coordinates appeared in Yi Li's mind, and they were quite far from his current location, seemingly beyond the wilderness zone. Yi Li thought that he had spent enough time in the wilderness zone, and it was time to leave. Following the coordinates in his mind, Yi Li arrived at a small town. When he reached the small town, the coordinates in his mind suddenly disappeared. Yi Li was puzzled. The coordinates had never disappeared before when he reached his destination. Could this small town be the destination? It shouldn't be. When he arrived at the small town, there was still a considerable distance from the coordinates in his mind. Without thinking too much, Yili observed the small town in front of him. It was evident that this small town had also been subjected to the scourge of the undead and was in a dilapidated state. Yili activated the Heavenly Spirit Eye to scan the small town, revealing that there were only a few scattered zombies in this small town. However, there were also a dozen or so scattered human genetic warriors, all of whom were teenagers. These teenagers were surrounded by the corpses of zombies. Yili wanted to ask if there was a base city nearby. He had spent enough time in the wilderness zone and felt like he was becoming a wild man. Shortly after, he walked towards the direction of the teenagers. Before long, he spotted more than a dozen teenage genetic warriors. "May I ask if there is a base city nearby?" Yili inquired. The group of teenagers were in decent condition in terms of the realm, all of them were first-tier evolved beings, around 15 or 16 years old. The sudden voice startled the teenagers, and they were taken aback. The teenagers stared at Yili in astonishment, and one of the bolder ones looked at him and said, Who are you? How did you get here?" Yili was puzzled by the question. What did he mean? "This is our Sky Blue Academy's primary trial ground." "But you're not a student of Sky Blue Academy." The teenager continued. "Sky Blue Academy." Yili pondered silently, feeling like he had heard this name before. She seemed to be from Sky Blue Base City. Could Sky Blue Academy also be related to Sky Blue Base City? "Are you all from Sky Blue Base City?" Yili asked. Chapter 342, Claude Zombies. The dozen or so teenagers were taken aback, and the bolder teenager replied to Yili, "Yes, we're from Sky Blue Base City." They were all puzzled about where Yili had come from because there was only one base city within thousands of kilometers, which was Sky Blue Base City. After thinking for a moment, Yili felt that the treasure marked on the super treasure map might be here in this small town. He had to search for it. Subsequently, Yili ignored the astonishment on the faces of the teenagers and continued to use the Heavenly Spirit Eye to investigate this inconspicuous small town. "Who are you?" Suddenly, a voice entered Yili's ears. Yili turned slowly and saw a middle-aged man in his 40s, a fifth-tier evolved being. "Teacher Lin." The group of teenagers, who were around 15 or 16 years old, called out to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked at Yili with caution. He couldn't discern Yili's level, but his intuition told him that Yili was not an ordinary person. Yili. "Is this place the primary trial ground of your Sky Blue Academy?" Yili asked. The middle-aged man was a teacher from the Sky Blue Academy named Lin Shi. Lin Shi looked at Yili with disbelief. "Are you from Sky Blue Base City?" "No." Yili shook his head. Lin Shi was stunned when he heard this. If Yili wasn't from Sky Blue Base City, where could he have come from? There was only Sky Blue Base City within thousands of kilometers. Could it be? Lin Shi suddenly thought of a shocking possibility. Yili might have come from the wilderness zone because this small town was not too far from the outskirts of the wilderness zone. "If I want to go to Sky Blue Base City, which direction should I go?" Yili asked Lin Shi. Since he had arrived at Sky Blue Base City, he thought he might as well visit it. It would be a shame not to, especially when he had a super treasure map that might lead to treasure in this small town. Lin Shi was about to speak when a cold laugh reached Yili's ears. "Ha, I didn't expect so many humans in this crappy town." The dozen or so teenagers were startled and looked at the dark race member before them in amazement. It was a soul spirit. Yili had seen quite a few soul spirits before. This soul spirit was a fourth-tier dark race member, one level lower than Lin Shi. Lin Shi breathed a sigh of relief. It was evident that this fourth-tier soul spirit posed no threat to them. "We're from Sky Blue Academy." If you don't want to die, get lost. Lin Shi shouted at the fourth-tier soul spirit. Kiki. The fourth-tier soul spirit chuckled and continued, with so many humans here, wouldn't I be a fool to leave? Soul spirits love to devour human souls and spirits. Come out, zombies. After the soul spirit shouted, suddenly, more than 100 zombies rushed out. Most of these zombies were first-level zombies. However, there were a few that caught Yili's interest. These zombies were second-level zombies, and what set them apart was their sharp claws, which gleamed with cold light. Yili had never seen clawed zombies like these before. He wondered if he could cultivate some of them. After all, in the Apocalypse Legion, besides generals, there also had to be soldiers. The dozen or so teenagers were taken aback by the sudden appearance of more than 100 zombies. Human, come here and let me eat your souls. The fourth-tier spirit soul giggled. Lin Shi sneered. I'm afraid these 100 zombies are not enough. Chapter 343, Kill in Seconds. The fourth-tier soul spirit sneered and looked at Lin Shi with scorn. Human, you're too presumptuous. As he spoke, two more fourth-tier soul spirits emerged. Lin Shi was taken aback. He hadn't expected there to be two more fourth-tier soul spirits. Now, with 3 fourth-tier soul spirits and 100 zombies, Lin Shi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Human, do you think that's enough now? The fourth-tier soul spirit sneered at Lin Shi. Lin Shi gritted his teeth but felt somewhat helpless. If he were alone, he would be confident in escaping. However, there were still over a dozen students with him. For a moment, the fifth-tier evolved being Lin Shi didn't know what to do. At this point, do you have anything worth hesitating about? Come over and let us devour your souls, this is your final end. One of the fourth-tier soul spirits chuckled. Lin Shi looked at the dozen or so students and said in a deep voice, Go, quickly. The dozen or so students were still in shock, standing motionless like statues. Go! Lin Shi shouted. Only then did the students snap out of their daze. They hurriedly ran back. Want to run? Attack them! The fourth-tier soul spirit shouted. Immediately, over 100 zombies charged forward. For a fifth-tier evolved being like Lin Shi, holding back over 100 zombies wouldn't be too difficult. However, the difficulty lay in dealing with the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. While Lin Shi withstood the onslaught of over 100 zombies, the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits rushed towards the students from Sky Blue Academy. These students were only first-tier evolved beings, far from a match for the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. The students from Sky Blue Academy were horrified. The 3 fourth-tier soul spirits chuckled and prepared to devour their souls. No! Lin Shi shouted. However, the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits paid no heed to him. In their eyes, the souls of these students were already easy prey. At this critical moment, a figure appeared in front of the students from Sky Blue Academy. It was a young man in his early 20s, who was naturally Yili. Yili's face remained calm as he looked at the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. The 3 fourth-tier soul spirits were taken aback. They hadn't seen how Yili had approached them. Could this human be a powerful individual? Leave, Yili said indifferently to the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. The 3 fourth-tier soul spirits hesitated for a moment. One of them furrowed his brow and said, Human, stop pretending. You'll be next. Yili smiled. Since you don't want to leave, then stay. With that, Yili raised his hand, and golden spiritual light radiated from his fingers. Swish! 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 Chapter 344, Arriving at Sky Blue Base City. Among the hundreds of zombies, there were several level 2 clawed zombies that Yili found quite interesting. He decided to synthesize a batch of them to play around with. While Yili effortlessly annihilated 3 fourth-tier soul spirits, Lin Shi became aware of Yili's terrifying power. He leaped out of the encirclement of zombies. Roar! Roar! The zombies rushed toward Yili. Among these zombies, the level 2 clawed zombies were of higher level and posed a slightly greater threat. Through observation, Yili found that these level 2 clawed zombies were much stronger than other level 2 zombies in terms of attack and speed. He raised his finger, and a shocking golden spiritual light shot out like a machine gun. The zombies instantly lost their combat abilities. Yili activated the synthesis grid in his mind and began synthesizing zombies. There were 3 clawed zombies. Yili synthesized the 3 clawed zombies to level 5 and checked their attributes: clawed zombie, level 5 zombie. Zombie attribute, speed. Zombie skill, steel blade. Yili thought their strength was not bad, but he wasn't sure how many of these clawed zombies were present in the different districts of Sky Blue Base City. The most important thing was to raise Long Yes level. Yili believed that the zombies he had cultivated so far were sufficient. Now it was time to create a real Apocalypse Legion. He placed the 3 level 5 clawed zombies into the system space and then noticed that Lin Shi and the students from Sky Blue Academy were frozen in shock. Lin Shi was about to say something, but Yili interrupted him. Don't worry, I'm not a member of the dark race, Yili said calmly. Lin Shi paused for a few seconds, then understood. In this vast world, there were all sorts of beings. If Yili were a member of the dark race, there would have been no chance for them to be saved. Thank you for saving us, Senior. Lin Shi quickly expressed his gratitude with a respectful salute. Yili waved his hand slightly. It's nothing. Senior, are you heading to Sky Blue Base City? Lin Shi suddenly asked. Yili nodded. Yes, it is. Lin Shi hesitated for a moment and then continued, Senior, do you know anyone in Sky Blue Base City? Lin Shi thought that if Yili was going to Sky Blue Base City to find someone, he might be able to help, as he had some connections in the city. Just take me to Sky Blue Base City, Yili replied. Lin Shi didn't press further. He knew that powerful individuals often had peculiar temperaments, and probing too much could provoke them. The students from Sky Blue Academy looked at Yili with admiration. His display of power had undoubtedly won them over. Subsequently, Lin Shi led Yili in the direction of Sky Blue Base City. Sky Blue Base City was a medium-sized base city with a population of over 60 million. It boasted formidable defenses and advanced technology. As they entered the outer city, Yili even spotted humanoid weapons, something he had only seen on television in China. Following Lin Shi into the outer city, they headed toward the main city. Sky Blue Base City's main city was extraordinarily luxurious, far surpassing many first-tier cities in China. Senior, where are you heading now? Lin Shi asked Yili. Yili thought that since he had arrived in such a bustling base city, he might as well take a look around. You can go on your way, you don't need to worry about me, Yili said. Lin Shi nodded and said, Senior, I'm a teacher at Sky Blue Academy. You are welcome to visit the academy. Chapter 345, Don't judge a book by its cover. After Lin Shi and the students from Sky Blue Academy left, Yili glanced at his tattered clothes and couldn't help but show a hint of dissatisfaction. He thought to himself that if he were in China, he would probably be mistaken for a beggar. Just as he was about to raise his head, he noticed the surprised looks of passers-by. It seemed that in Sky Blue Base City, it was impossible for someone dressed as shabbily as he was to appear. He should buy a few sets of clothes first. Yili opened the Point Mall. Now he no longer had to worry about points, so he exchanged some post-apocalyptic coins and activated his heavenly spirit eyes to find a shopping mall. Before long, Yili found a clothing store that seemed decent. He headed towards the store. Upon reaching the store, Yili was stopped by someone. Sir, you can't enter, said the female attendant, looking at Yili with disdain. Yili couldn't help but smile inwardly. He didn't understand why he always encountered so many snobbish people. Why can't I go in? Yili asked calmly, looking at the young female attendant of his age. The female attendant's face showed a trace of disdain. She assessed Yili's clothes from head to toe, and her meaning was clear. Through the glass, Yili took a look at himself and was startled. His current appearance with a scraggly beard, disheveled hair, and tattered clothes did make him look like a beggar. It seems like I've spent too much time in the wilderness. I almost turned into a wild man, Yili mumbled to himself. Sir, please leave, the female attendant's voice rang in Yili's ears once again. Yili smiled, you can see that my clothes are tattered. If one don't go in to buy some new ones, won't one have to be dressed like this all the time? Can you afford it? The clothes inside are something you can't even dream of wearing in your lifetime, the female attendant replied with even more disdain. Yili casually took out a handful of post-apocalyptic coins from his pocket and said, Is this enough? The female attendant was shocked. She couldn't have imagined that someone who looked like a beggar could easily produce so much money. Yili didn't pay any more attention to the female attendant. He strolled into the store. Help me pick out several sets of well-fitting clothes, Yili calmly requested. Now that he knew Yili had money, the female attendant quickly helped him choose clothes. After trying on a few sets, Yili was satisfied and paid without hesitation. He didn't have a clear concept of money at this point. If he ran out of it, he could always exchange more in the Point Mall. At this moment, the female attendant finally realized how wealthy Yili was. The clothes you picked for me are very good. These are tips for you, Yili said calmly. With that, Yili casually pulled out a handful of post-apocalyptic coins from his pocket and handed them to the female attendant. The female attendant was stunned, feeling a trembling sensation throughout her body. She accepted the post-apocalyptic coins that Yili handed over, and her palms couldn't help but feel hot. She had never received so much in tips before. The female attendant stared at the post-apocalyptic coins in her hand in amazement. She could hardly believe it was real. If she sent this money to her mother would be ecstatic. At the same time, she also understood the truth: don't judge a book by its cover. The sea is immeasurable, and people are unfathomable. When the female attendant raised her head to thank Yili, she realized that he had already disappeared without a trace. Chapter 346, Why Are You Here? Now that he had bought new clothes, Yili thought it was time to get a haircut. His hair was currently flowing down his shoulders. He entered a fairly decent barbershop and, after getting his hair done, he went to a hotel. After taking a shower, he changed into his newly bought clothes. Yili stood by the mirror, looking at the person in the reflection. Not bad, Yili muttered to himself. It had been a while since he had enjoyed a proper meal in the wilderness zone. Since he was in Sky Blue Bay City, he thought it was time to find a good place to eat. Afterward, Yili left the hotel and used his heavenly spirit eyes to survey the area, eventually finding a Western restaurant that seemed quite nice. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Yili took a seat by the window and ordered an expensive steak and red wine. Before he could start eating, a jarring voice reached his ears. Don't you know this is my seat? The voice was arrogant, causing everyone in the restaurant to look over. They couldn't help but start discussing the situation. Oh, it's young Master Gu. This will be interesting. This guy took young Master Gu's seat, he's in for trouble. Who dares to provoke young Master Gu in Sky Blue Bay City? The voices of the people in the restaurant naturally reached Yili's ears. However, he paid no attention to it, maintaining a calm and composed expression without even raising his head. Young Master Gu. A middle-aged, chubby man in his 40s rushed over, his oily face filled with anxiety. This middle-aged man was the manager of the Western restaurant. A small restaurant like this naturally didn't dare to offend someone like Gu Bai. Are you trying to go out of business? Even my reserved seat has been taken by someone else, Gu Bai said coldly. The manager was startled by Gu Bai's words. He quickly looked at the terrified waiter next to him and shouted, "Do you want to lose your job? Do you even realize that it's young Master Gus' reserved seat?" The waiter was stunned and didn't know how to react. "What are you standing there for? Get that person to move to another seat," the manager ordered. The waiter hurried to Yi Li's side and said, "Sir, I'm really sorry, but this seat is reserved for young Master Gu." Before the waiter could finish his sentence, Yi Li interrupted him. "I don't like your voice. Let him come and talk to me himself," Yi Li said calmly. The waiter was now in a dilemma, not knowing whether to stay or leave. "I, Gu Bai, am somewhat of a figure in Sky Blue Base City. Today, I want to see who is so audacious as to sit in my reserved seat." Gu Bai, with disdain in his eyes, looked at Yi Li. Suddenly, he felt like he had seen this man's face before. "Is that so?" Yi Li put down his knife and fork and slowly raised his head. Gu Bai looked at Yi Li's face, and his pupils contracted rapidly. It's you." Gu Bai had seen this face in the Falling Rock mountain range, the Tier 1 evolved being. But at that time, there were so many ferocious wolves around. How did this person manage to survive? Could it be? Gu Bai thought of a possibility. Perhaps she hadn't died, and she had used some treasure to save him. "I never expected you to survive." "Truly surprising," Gu Bai said with a faint smile. Chapter 347, Can't even throw a punch. Yi Li didn't pay any further attention to Gu Bai and continued to eat his steak with the knife and fork. Seeing this, Gu Bai furrowed his brows. As the eldest young master of the Gu family in Sky Blue Base City, he was rarely ignored like this. "Didn't one just tell you? This is my reserved seat. Considering we've met before, I'll let it slide this time." "So leave," Gu Bai said. But Yi Li acted as if he didn't hear him. He was still eating his steak and drinking red wine. Gu Bai gritted his teeth, his eyes already spewing out anger. "I'll say it again. If you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite," Gu Bai warned. As a third-tier evolved being and the eldest young master of the Gu family, being ignored by someone like Yi Li, a first-tier evolved being, was infuriating. The patrons in the Western restaurant were shocked, thinking that Yi Li must have a death wish to disregard young Master Gus' words like this. Yi Li, unfazed, slowly put down his knife and fork, looking at Gu Bai calmly. "Do you know how pitiful you are?" Gu Bai was taken aback. He couldn't have imagined that Yi Li would say such words. "What do you mean?" Gu Bai stared at Yi Li. "Isn't it pitiful for an ant like you to talk to someone like me?" Yi Li said lightly. When these words came out, everyone in the restaurant couldn't help but gasp in astonishment, staring at Yi Li with wide eyes. Gu Bai was dumbfounded. He never expected Yi Li to call him an ant. "Leave. One have no interest in you," Yi Li said leisurely. You're asking for death." Gu Bai roared. With a snarl, Gu Bai clenched his fist and threw a punch at Yi Li. His fist was surrounded by red spiritual energy, marking him as a great genetic warrior. Yi Li shook his head inwardly, wondering why there were so many pests like this around. The people in the restaurant sighed and anticipated Yi Li's fate. In Sky Blue Base City, although Gu Bai wasn't the most powerful young master, those who dared to provoke him were few and far between. Yi Li made no effort to defend himself, and he didn't even attempt to dodge. It was as if he hadn't noticed Gu Bai's punch coming at him. Gu Bai's fist, imbued with red spiritual energy, was about to hit Yi Li's body. With a triumphant smirk on his face, he expected to see Yi Li's painful reaction. However, what happened next shocked everyone. Clank! The fist, enveloped in red spiritual energy, struck Yi Li's body but made a clanking sound as if it had hit metal. Ah! What followed was a piercing, pig-like scream of agony that filled the air. It was Gu Bai who was now howling in pain. Gu Bai clutched his injured hand, writhing in agony. He had never experienced such intense pain in his entire life. Everyone in the restaurant stared at Yi Li. He couldn't believe there were still stars in this post-apocalyptic world. It seemed interesting. A concert in 10 days, and they were already selling tickets. It appeared that Xia Chun was a big star. Without thinking too much, Yi Li returned to his hotel room to spend the night. The next day, sunlight streamed in through the window, casting a radiant glow on his handsome face. Zombie chest Zio. Yi Li opened the zombie chests with a single command: acquired gene points, 1000, strength points, 1000, speed points, 1000, defense points, 1000. Acquired equipment enhancement stone 11. Yi Li integrated the acquired attribute points into his body and then examined the description of the equipment enhancement stone. Equipment enhancement stone enhances equipment, allowing it to increase by 1 level, up to S level. Yi Li thought about his dragon-slaying blade and heavenly tower, both of which were beyond SSS tier artifacts. They had no need for this equipment enhancement stone. He then checked the equipment of the Apocalypse Legion. Das silver boxing gloves were S level, swordsman all cheese cleave sword was S level, but Longius water and fire merciless spear was only level. Chapter 349, 5th tier spirit soul. Without much thought, Yi Li attached equipment strengthening stones to the water and fire merciless spear. Strengthening initiated IO%, 30%, 60%, IO0%. Strengthening successful. Water and fire merciless spear has been upgraded to S grade. Currently, Long Yu was only a 4th tier zombie and too weak. Yi Li planned to visit various areas of Sky Blue Base City to level up Long Yu and also synthesize some clawed zombies. Afterward, Yi Li got up, freshened up, and left the city. Once outside the outer walls of Sky Blue Base City, Yi Li arrived at another city, a mid-sized one. He released the Apocalypse Legion from the system space and had them attract zombies. Giggle, don't run, human. Your destiny is to have your soul devoured by me. A few minutes later, a piercing voice reached Yi Li's ears. Yi Li followed the voice and saw a woman about his age being chased by a spirit soul. The spirit soul was of the 5th tier, while the woman was a 4th tier evolved being. The woman seemed exhausted, and it appeared that she had not only been through a fierce battle, but had also run for quite a while. The woman was running in Yi Li's direction, with the spirit soul close behind, constantly taunting her. Suddenly, the woman spotted Yi Li, and her pupils contracted. Run, she yelled at Yi Li. Yi Li gave a faint smile. He hadn't expected the woman to be so kind-hearted, just like Xia Shi. On the surface, she seemed as cold as ice, but her heart was hundreds of times kinder than an average person's. The woman was startled, not understanding why Yi Li wasn't running. Behind her was a 5th tier spirit soul. Run! There is a dark race member behind me, the woman shouted at Yi Li again, thinking he might not have heard. However, Yi Li still appeared to not hear anything, remaining motionless with a calm and composed expression on his face. The woman clenched her teeth. The man had a chance to live, but he was acting like a deaf person. She had no other choice. Finally, the woman reached Yi Li. She didn't want to bother with him because she thought he was either crazy or foolish. Even after seeing a 5th tier spirit soul, he still didn't run. As she was about to run past Yi Li, a hand suddenly grabbed her hand. The woman was shocked as if she had been struck by lightning, her entire body shivering. Her fair face was filled with horror. Who was this person? Why did he grab my hand? The 5th tier spirit soul also stopped. Spirit souls had no physical form, similar to the Grim Reaper in Chinese movies, only lacking a scythe. Giggle, one didn't expect another human to join us. It seems you'll have a feast today, the 5th tier spirit soul laughed smugly. Leave, or you will die soon, Yili calmly said to the fifth-tier spirit soul. The woman was dumbfounded. She couldn't believe what Yili had just said. What are you doing? This is a fifth-tier spirit soul. The woman quickly whispered to Yili. She had initially wanted to help him escape, but he not only didn't run, but also grabbed her hand. Moreover, what was going on with his hand? The woman felt that Yili's hand was like a vice, firmly holding hers. Yili smiled. He looked at the woman and said in a calm tone, "Is a fifth-tier spirit soul very strong?" Chapter 350, The shock has just begun. The woman was taken aback. She couldn't believe that Yili had just said such words. Is a fifth-tier soul spirit really that powerful? She was a fourth-tier evolved being, so if a fifth-tier soul spirit wasn't strong enough, would she need to flee? Human, do you think I'm strong? The fifth-tier soul spirit looked at Yili with a mischievous grin. In his eyes, both Yili and the woman were already his prey. Yili thought for a few seconds and then looked at the fifth-tier soul spirit and said, "I not only think you're not strong, but you're also as weak as an ant." What? The fifth-tier soul spirit was shocked to hear this and couldn't believe that Yili would say such a thing. The woman was also stunned, wondering how this person could say such words. Such an arrogant human. I'll devour your soul right now and see if you're still arrogant. The fifth-tier soul spirit said coldly. As he spoke, the fifth-tier soul spirit rushed towards Yili. The woman, seeing this, turned pale with shock and stood there, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Yili raised his index finger and looked calmly. The woman could swear that she had never been so shocked in her entire life. At a moment of life and death, he was still calmly looking at his finger. Was he already beyond caring about life and death, or did he not realize he was about to die? The woman closed her eyes, knowing that Yili's fate would be very tragic. Just as the fifth-tier soul spirit was about to attack, Yili pointed his finger. "I have one finger, piercing through the sky." A terrifying golden spirit light shot towards the fifth-tier soul spirit. The fifth-tier soul spirit widened his eyes and tried to stop, but his speed was too fast, and he couldn't stop in time. Ali! The horrifying golden spirit light had pierced through the fifth-tier soul spirit's body. Listening to his screams, the woman opened her eyes and was shocked. The fifth-tier soul spirit was disappearing visibly at an alarming rate, and the screams were truly hair-raising. In the end, the fifth-tier soul spirit disappeared forever from the world. You. The woman took 3 steps back. She finally understood why Yili could be so calm. It turned out that Yili was such a powerful individual. Yili looked at the woman indifferently and said slowly, "Are you very shocked?" The woman was stunned. She was indeed extremely shocked. Just as the woman didn't know how to respond, Yili spoke again, "Never stop being shocked because everything one do will keep you shocked for 3 days and 3 nights." Upon hearing this, the woman was even more shocked. She looked at Yili, who was handsome and seemingly close to her age. Why was his cultivation tier so high? She didn't understand, she really didn't. "What's your name?" Yili suddenly asked. "I am Xia Chun," the woman replied. "Xia Chun." Yili thought for a moment. He seemed to have heard that name in the sky blue base city. Right, it was that famous singer Xia Chun, who was going to have a concert in 10 days. Could this be the same famous star? Xia Chun stole a glance at Yili and took another look. She had never seen anyone like Yili before. She thought the shock she just experienced was the most shocking moment of her life. But even if she used all her strength, she couldn't have imagined that the shock had only just begun. Roar! The Apocalypse Legion, accompanied by zombies, had already come from all directions. Chapter 351, A Fifth-Tier Zombie. This Xia Chun looked at the scene before her in utter shock. How was this possible? Thousands of zombies. And, Xia Chun's eyes widened more than they ever had in her life. She rubbed her eyes, feeling like she must be seeing things. 6 golden purple-eyed zombies. 9th-tier zombies. Seeing this, Xia Chun's soul seemed to shudder. She quickly looked at Yili and found his face seemed as if he hadn't noticed these zombies at all. What should we do? Xia Chun asked Yili. Yili waved his hand calmly and said, no need to panic. Xia Chun was taken aback. With so many zombies, 6 9th-tier zombies, and 1 4th-tier zombie. Could he remain so calm? Xia Chun couldn't fathom Yili's composure. She couldn't even dream that there could be such a composed person in this world. The Apocalypse Legion had led the zombies close, most of which were level 1 zombies. Yili took a look and noticed several dozen level 2 clawed zombies. Not only could they tear up Long Yu, but they could also be used to synthesize some clawed zombies. This was a good opportunity. Attack! Yili ordered the army of the Apocalypse Legion. With Yili's command, the Apocalypse Legion began to take action. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and started synthesizing. He synthesized a level 3 clawed zombie, then another level 3 clawed zombie. Ding, Long Yu has leveled up to a 5th-tier zombie. These zombies' levels were too low, they were all level 1 zombies. It felt uninteresting to synthesize them after getting used to synthesizing level 3 to 5 zombies in the wilderness zone. He checked and found that there were 15 level 3 clawed zombies now. Including the 3 he had synthesized previously, he now had a total of 18 clawed zombies. Yili had no plans to synthesize these 18 level 3 clawed zombies, instead, he intended to cultivate them. Thinking of the legendary Yan Yun 18 riders in the ancient times, he decided to name his group the 18 Clawed. He looked at Xia Chun again and found her standing still like a statue. Yili shook his head. He had clearly told her never to be shocked, so why wasn't she listening? However, he could understand. Who could remain unshaken when facing him? Yili. He doubted he could find anyone like that in this world. Yili found a place to sit down. He hadn't eaten since leaving Sky Blue Bay City, so he took out a box of food from the system space and began to eat and drink. Xia Chun swallowed hard. She felt as though all the strength in her body had been drained. Only now did she truly understand what kind of person Yili was. No. Yili was not a person but a member of the dark race, an entity that she couldn't imagine how powerful it was. After finishing his meal, Yili planned to continue finding zombies to synthesize. Long Yu was only a 5th-tier zombie now. Her level was too low. He also wanted to figure out the location of the super treasure map, but at the moment, he had no clue. When he left the wilderness zone, the coordinates had suddenly disappeared from his mind, something he had never experienced before. Roar! Suddenly, Yili heard a fierce zombie roar. Turning around, he saw that a zombie was already engaged in a battle with Xia Chun. What surprised Yili was that this particular zombie was a 5th-tier zombie. A 5th-tier zombie. Could there be 5th-tier zombies here? Yili's face showed a trace of excitement. After all, Long Yu was only a 5th-tier zombie now. Chapter 352, Rescuing Xia Chun. Xia Chun was grappling with the 5th-tier male zombie. She was a 4th-tier evolved being and had been severely frightened. Without paying attention for a moment, she was bitten on the arm by the 5th-tier male zombie. Xia Chun turned pale with shock. Being bitten by a zombie meant she would also turn into one. She hadn't even had the chance to inspect the wound when the 5th-tier male zombie let out a roar and lunged towards her. Xia Chun's eyes widened, realizing that she was powerless to resist the attack of the 5th-tier male zombie. But to her surprise, just as the 5th-tier male zombie was about to pounce on her, it was suddenly struck by a horrifying golden spirit light and fell to the ground. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and merged the 5th-tier male zombie with Long Yu, which resulted in Long Yu becoming a 6th-tier zombie. Yili considered himself lucky. Generally, it would take quite some effort to synthesize Long Yu into a 6th-tier zombie. As Yili looked at Xia Chun, he noticed that her arm had already started to show signs of zombification, and it wouldn't be long before she turned into a zombie herself. Am I going to turn into a zombie? Xia Chun looked at the zombification on her arm, her eyes becoming lifeless, and her once fair face losing its luster. She didn't want to become a zombie, she really didn't want to. At this moment, Xia Chun deeply regretted her decision to come here. If she could do it over, she would never have come. Her concert was just 10 days away, and yet she had chosen to come here for some experience. Looking at Xia Chun, Yili couldn't help but think of Xiao Hui. Back then, Xiao Hui had been ambushed by a zombie and nearly turned into a zombie. Senior, am one going to turn into a zombie soon? Xiao Hu's words still echoed in Yili's ears. Yili sighed inwardly, wondering how Xiao Hui was doing now. If she were here, she definitely wouldn't want Xia Chun to become a zombie. In that case, one will save her. Immediately, Yili walked towards Xia Chun with majestic air. Xia Chun, who was watching her own hands zombify, trembled violently. Then, she clenched her teeth and made a decision. That decision was to commit suicide. She would rather die than become a zombie. With all her remaining strength, Xia Chun raised her palm and activated a trace of purple spirit energy that ran through her body. Purple spirit energy was an S-level genetic warrior's ability. Just as her palm with the purple spirit energy was about to strike her chest, a strong hand grabbed her hand. Xia Chun was startled, and she looked at Yili in astonishment. You. Yili didn't reply. Instead, he gently tapped Xia Chun's head, and she immediately lost consciousness. Here, skip half an hour. As her entire body shivered, Yili began to feel bored. The zombification on Xia Chun's body had disappeared. Yili felt no guilt, he was saving Xia Chun's life. Whether in the apocalypse or in the world he came from, a woman's most precious thing was always her life. Not long after, Xia Chun slowly opened her eyes. After waking up, Xia Chun suddenly remembered something, and her whole body trembled. She quickly looked at her hands. Upon seeing this, she was dumbfounded. One didn't turn into a zombie. Xia Chun found it hard to believe. She distinctly remembered being bitten by the zombie, and her body had already started to zombify. Chapter 353, a 7th-tier member of Dark Knight tribe. Xia Chun couldn't imagine why she didn't become a zombie after being bitten by a zombie. She thought for a moment. She remembered that when she was about to kill herself, a strong hand grabbed her hand. At this point, Xia Chun could only think of one possibility. She nodded slightly and looked at the silent Yili. The astonishing display of power Yili had just shown had left her in shock, and she now understood that Yili was an immensely powerful member of the Dark Race. Did this member of the Dark Race save me? Xia Chun wondered to herself. There was no one else here, and since Yili was the one who had saved her, she couldn't think of any other reason. But he was a Dark Race member, would he actually save people? Everyone in the Sky Blue Base City knew that the Dark Race was universally condemned, and it was rumored that the zombie virus had been created by a supreme being from the Dark Race. Yili had been in this parallel world for a while now, and every time he synthesized zombies, people nearby would think he was a member of the Dark Race. Although Xia Chun didn't speak, he could tell with his toes that she also thought that he was a member of the Dark Race, a powerful one. Don't just stand there. Yes, one did save you, and I am not a member of the Dark Race. Yili looked at Xia Chun and said calmly. Xia Chun was surprised by Yili's words, she hadn't expected him to say that. Senior, are you really not a member of the Dark Race? Xia Chun remembered that just a moment ago, Yi Li had reduced the number of zombies and made the high-leveled zombies seem to obey his commands. Wasn't that something only the dark race could do? Yi Li gave a faint smile. Do you think I need to lie to you? He didn't want to explain, because trying to explain to these low-leveled evolved beings was like casting pearls before swine. Yi Li didn't continue to pay attention to Xia Chun. While she was fair-skinned and beautiful, he had encountered countless beautiful women, and she was not the only one with such looks. He wondered why there would be a fifth-tier zombie in this small city. Such high-tiered zombies were rare, and he had only encountered them in the wilderness zone. Have you seen where my zombie went? Suddenly, a very cold voice reached Yi Li's ears. Yi Li followed the voice and saw a dark race member completely shrouded in dark energy on the nearby high-rise building. The dark race member was holding a silver horn and appeared extremely eerie. A seventh-tier member of the dark race, Yi Li murmured to himself. To be honest, a seventh-tier member of the dark race should be like a mountain to Xia Chun. However, for Yi Li, they were nothing more than ants. A fifth-tier zombie ran over here just now. Did you see it? The seventh-tier dark race member continued to ask. The seventh-tier dark race member was enveloped in an aura of darkness, making it impossible to see their appearance. However, just listening to their cold voice was enough to send shivers down one's spine. That fifth-tier zombie ran to us, so we saw it, Yi Li said lightly. Oh. The seventh-tier dark race member seemed somewhat stunned. Since you saw my zombies, why are you still alive? The seventh-tier dark race member asked. The seventh-tier dark race member was from a tribe of the dark races, called the Dark Knight tribe. Their ability was to control mutated zombies. Yi Li pondered for a few seconds and then looked at the seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member and slowly said, perhaps it's because we're too cute, so it didn't want to bite us, Yi Li replied nonchalantly. Wanna gift the story? Try one. Chapter 354. What realm are you in? The seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member was taken aback, clearly not expecting Yi Li to respond this way. Human, how can you remain so calm in front of me? The seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member thought that Yi Li must haven't seen his zombies, but he couldn't understand how Yi Li could be so composed in his presence. Yi Li smiled and replied, I'm always this calm no matter who I'm facing. It's just how 1 a.m. For some reason, Xia Chun wasn't worried at all at this moment. After witnessing Yi Li's incredible abilities, she knew that the strange seventh-tier dark race member on the tall building couldn't possibly be a match for Yi Li. The seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member sneered, Human, I just wanted to ask where my zombies went, but now one think I should kill you. Yi Li thought that this seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member could have been living well, but he just wanted to provoke him. As the saying went, heaven has a road, you don't take it, hell has no door, you barge in. If you want to kill me, come and try. Yi Li slowly hooked his finger at the Tier 7 Dark Knight tribe member. The seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member widened his eyes as if he had never been insulted in such a manner before. He glared at Yi Li and angrily declared, Human, you're asking for death. With that, a surge of dark energy rushed toward Yi Li. Yi Li watched as the dark energy approached. While it had formidable power, it was still no match for him. The seventh-tier Dark Knight tribe member chuckled coldly. In his eyes, this attack would surely be fatal for Yi Li. Just as the dark energy was about to reach Yi Li, he raised his finger, and golden spiritual light radiated from it. Swish! With a sharp sound, the astonishing golden spiritual light clashed with the dark energy, completely dispelling it. Xia Chun had not paid attention earlier, but now, as she watched the dark energy burst forth from Yi Li's fingertip, her eyes widened in shock. A SSS tier genetic warrior. Xia Chun's heart was in turmoil. She had heard of SSS tier genetic warriors but had never seen one. She had always thought that such warriors only existed in legends. Yet now, she found herself face to face with an SSS-tier genetic warrior, and it left her utterly astonished. Yili was a 9th-tier evolved being who had practiced the 4th level of the Ancient Devil Tome. The Ancient Devil Tome was equivalent to the inner martial arts techniques in martial arts novels, such as the Eagle Claw or Dragon Subduing Palm. However, the Dark Race member on the tall building was only 7th tier, and there was no way he could match Yili. It was like a monster facing Ultraman, and the outcome was certain. Without a doubt, at the moment when the golden spiritual light clashed with the dark energy was completely dispersed. The terrifying golden spiritual light surged toward the 7th-tier Dark Race member on the tall building. The 7th-tier Dark Race member, perched on the tall building, was greatly alarmed. He never would have thought that Yili was so terrifying. In a desperate attempt, he quickly dodged the attack. A 7th-tier Dark Race member was already considered a high-level Dark Race member. The 7th-tier Dark Race member managed to evade the assault of the golden spiritual light. Human, what realm are you in? The 7th-tier Dark Race member looked at Yili with utter shock. He had originally thought that Yili was as good as dead, but he never expected himself to provoke someone he shouldn't. Yili contemplated for a few seconds and then looked at the 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member. It's not that high, just the 9th tier. Chapter 355, Do you think you can survive? When Yili said those words, the 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member was instantly filled with shock. "Ni, 9th-tier evolved being." The 7th-tier Dark Race member would rather believe that the sky was about to fall than accept that Yili was a 9th-tier evolved being. Although he didn't want to believe it, the power Yili had just displayed left him with no choice but to believe. Xia Chun was also in complete awe. She had never imagined that Yili was a 9th-tier evolved being. After contemplating for a few seconds, the 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member said to Yili, "Human, I apologize for my earlier offense. One will leave now." This 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member adhered to the principle of, with green hills remaining, there's no need to worry about running out of firewood, so he was preparing to depart. However, just as he took a step, Yili's voice reached his ears. "Do you really think you can survive?" The 7th-tier Dark Race member was stunned and turned around to find Yili looking at him with indifference. Then, the Dark Race member clenched his teeth and stared at Yili. "Human, even if you're a 9th-tier evolved being, do you really think you can kill me if one want to escape?" Yili chuckled. He was amused. He hadn't been this happy in the past 10 days. Could he kill him? A mere 7th-tier Dark Race member dared to say such words to him, Yili. How could he not laugh? "Why are you laughing?" The 7th-tier Dark Race member stared at Yili with a cold expression. "Since you believe that I can't kill you, why don't you give it a try?" Yili replied slowly. Silence, a deathly silence. The 7th-tier Dark Race member's face turned incredibly cold. He glared at Yili in anger. "Human, don't underestimate me." As soon as he finished speaking, the Tier 7 Dark Knight tribe member turned around and exuded a dark aura as if he was about to disappear into the dark aura. At that moment, Yili activated his swift steps, leaving only an afterimage in his original position. When Yili reappeared, he was already on the rooftop where the 7th-tier Dark Race member was located. The entire process had been lightning fast, taking less than a second. The 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member, who saw this, was terrified beyond belief. "Human, you," the 7th-tier Dark Race member hadn't finished speaking when his life was extinguished forever. Yili had drawn an unparalleled demonic blade from the system space. An illusory blood dragon with 5 claws coiled in the sky, and the sound of a dragon's roar mixed with the ringing of a blade filled the air, sending shivers down the spine. Yili raised the blade and unleashed a slash. Swish! This slash possessed a terrifying power that was beyond comparison. All! With a deafening scream, the 7th-tier dark race member's life was forever extinguished. Yi Li sheathed the dragon-slaying blade back into the system space and leaped to Xia Chun's side. At this moment, Xia Chun was in a state of shock, recalling the words Yi Li had said to her. Are you very shocked? Never be too shocked because everything one do will leave you astonished for 3 days and 3 nights. But, despite trying to resist the astonishment, she couldn't help but be amazed. Xia Chun could no longer fathom Yi Li's terror. As she looked at his slightly slender figure, she felt as if he could conquer the world. Miss, you are indeed here. A somewhat flustered voice suddenly appeared, followed by more than a dozen middle-aged men rushing over. Chapter 356, Heading to the Xia family. Xia Chun was taken aback. She hadn't expected her family members to come here. Miss, you should go back quickly. The family head found out that you came to Jiang City for training and is furious. The dozen or so middle-aged men were all 5th-tier evolved beings, and their strength was not weak. Xia Chun was shocked. She had only told Xia Shi about her trip to Jiang City, so it seemed that her little sister had reported her to their father. Ever since Xia Shi had returned from the wilderness zone after a near-death experience, she had changed. Her cold and aloof demeanor had disappeared. Senior, do you want to come back with me to Sky Blue Base City? After a few seconds, Xia Chun gathered her courage and looked at Yi Li. Yi Li thought for a moment and then nodded. All right. Xia Chun was surprised by Yi Li's agreement. She had asked the question on a whim. The dozen or so Xia family genetic warriors were somewhat astonished. They had never seen Yi Li before, and there was no record of him in the world of genetic warriors in Sky Blue Base City. Miss, who is he? One of the 5th-tier evolved beings asked tentatively. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Xia Chun furrowed her brow. The terrifying power Yi Li had just displayed was something she didn't want to provoke. Otherwise, the lives of these Xia family genetic warriors would be in danger. The 5th-tier evolved being immediately closed his mouth upon hearing Xia Chun's words. They headed in the direction of Sky Blue Base City. Yi Li thought that his trip to Jiangcheng had been quite fruitful. Not only had he synthesized a 7th-tier zombie from Longyu, but he also had 18 Tier 3 clawed zombies. The next time he came out of Sky Blue Base City, he would have Longyu and the 18 clawed zombie tier up. After arriving in Sky Blue Base City, Yi Li followed Xia Chun towards the Xia family. The Xia family in Sky Blue Base City, like the Gu family, was one of the top families and a pillar of the genetic warrior families. Before long, Yi Li arrived outside the Xia family's residence. The Xia family's building was magnificent, resembling a palace. Miss, this is my home. Let's go inside, Xia Chun said to Yi Li. Yi Li nodded and walked inside. Xia Chun was the eldest daughter of the Xia family's main branch. Her father, Xia Hong, was the head of the Xia family and an 8th-tier evolved being. Her position in the Xia family was undoubtedly high. Some Xia family juniors greeted Xia Chun as they passed by. Sister, you're finally back, a voice reached Yi Li's ears. This voice was extremely familiar to Yi Li because it belonged to Xia Shi, whom he had encountered in the wilderness zone. Yi Li not only saved Xia Shi in the wilderness zone, but also changed her personality. The Xia Shi he had met before was cold and aloof, but the current Xia Shi seemed a bit mischievous. Tell me, did you tell father about my whereabouts? Xia Chun asked Xia Shi. I. Father kept pressing me, so I had no choice but to tell him, Xia Shi said like a child who had done something wrong, lowering her head in embarrassment. Sister, one feel like I'm done for, Xia Shi suddenly said. As her words fell, Xia Shi raised her head, but as she did so, she couldn't say anything more. A handsome face was reflected in her pupils, a face she had dreamed of at least 10 times. Say. Senior. Xia Shi was dumbfounded. She couldn't believe it. She hurriedly rubbed her eyes, but no matter how she rubbed, the person in front of her remained the same. Chapter 357, Meet Xia Shi again. Even in her dreams, Xia Shi wouldn't have imagined that Yi Li would appear before her at this moment. Senior, how did you? Xia Shi didn't know how to continue speaking. She felt extremely excited, and she hadn't been this excited her entire life, from birth until now. Xia Chun was somewhat puzzled. She wondered if Xia Shi knew Yi Li. Could it be? Suddenly, Xia Chun thought of an astonishing possibility. Yi Li was the senior who had saved Xia Shi in the wilderness zone. This possibility was incredibly shocking because Xia Shi would not know Yi Li otherwise. As for Xia Chun being Xia Zai's sister, Yi Li had already guessed it when the dozen or so Xia family genetic warriors appeared in Jiang City. Why? Does my appearance surprise you? Yi Li looked at Xia Shi calmly. Xia Shi was taken aback. She was not only surprised but shocked to an unimaginable extent. I just didn't expect you to suddenly appear in front of me, Xia Shi said. After returning from the wilderness zone, Xia Shi had thought that she might never see Yi Li again in her lifetime. Only now did she realize how wrong her thoughts were. Miss, the family head wants you to come inside. A fifth-tier evolved being walked out of the Xia family's hall and said to Xia Chun and Xia Shi. Xia Chun and Xia Shi exchanged glances before entering the hall. Yi Li found a place to sit casually. He picked up a small stone and played with it. What is your relationship with Sister Chun? A somewhat harsh voice entered Yi Li's ears. Yi Li nodded slightly, and the one speaking was a teenager who looked quite good, about 17 or 18 years old, and he was a second-tier evolved being. Once the teenager's words were spoken, the younger generation of the Xia family all gathered around. They all wanted to know how Yi Li would answer next. It's not much of a relationship. I'm just her savior, Yi Li replied calmly. The younger generation of the Xia family looked at Yi Li, and they couldn't believe his words. Xia Chun was the #1 talent in the Xia family, an S-level genetic talent, and a fourth-tier evolved being. She was undoubtedly a genius in the entire Sky Blue Base City. Sister Chun is a fourth-tier evolved being. Are you even more powerful than her? A girl who appeared to be 15 or 16 years old asked Yi Li. The younger generation of the Xia family looked at Yi Li, and they found it hard to believe that Yi Li could be Xia Chun's savior. Yi Li contemplated for a few seconds and then slowly spoke. Is a fourth-tier evolved being considered strong in your eyes? Once Yi Li said this, the younger generation of the Xia family was left dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that Yi Li would say such words. Wasn't a fourth-tier evolved being strong enough? After all, Xia Chun belonged to the younger generation, so she must have limitless potential for the future. Are you an ordinary person? The girl who had just spoken to Yi Li asked. Her words implied that Yi Li must be an ordinary person who didn't even understand the system of evolved beings unless he was incredibly powerful. The younger generation of the Xia family certainly wouldn't believe that Yi Li was a super powerhouse. However, even if he were an ordinary person, he should at least know about the system of evolved beings, right? In the eyes of the younger generation of the Xia family, Yi Li's words were absurd. Yi Li smiled faintly. If I were an ordinary person, how could I have saved Xia Chun? Wanna gift the story? Try one. Chapter 358, The Shock of the Young Generation of the Xia Family. The young generation of the Xia family were left astonished by Yi Li's words. They didn't believe that Yi Li was Xia Chun's savior, but he insisted on it. Could it be that he really was Xia Chun's savior? No, that couldn't be possible. You don't believe me? Yi Li looked calmly at the young generation of the Xia family, numbering around 20. We don't, a young man said firmly. Yi Li smiled inwardly and thought that since he had some free time, he might as well show them a thing or two. He looked around and saw a massive boulder not far away. It was beautifully shaped and seemed to be for decorative purposes. Do you believe that one can turn that boulder into dust with just my eyes? Yili pointed at the huge boulder with his finger. As soon as he said this, the young generation of the Xia family widened their eyes, finding Yili's claim somewhat ridiculous. Turn such a large boulder into dust with just his eyes? No one would believe that. One know it. It must be Sister Chun who saved you, a girl aged around 15 or 16 said. In her view, Yili didn't have any abilities. His bragging skills, on the other hand, were top-notch. Once the young generation of the Xia family heard this, they felt as if they woke up from their dreams. Other than Sister Chun saving him, was there any other explanation? Since you claim that you can turn that large stone into dust with your eyes, then show us your abilities. We're all waiting, a young man said mockingly. The young generation of the Xia family all wore smirks, wanting to see Yili make a fool of himself. They also wanted Yili to understand that boasting without ability wouldn't work. Yili sighed inwardly. He could understand why the younger generation of the Xia family didn't believe him. It was just because they had no idea how vast the world was and how high the sky was. Then, he looked at the gigantic boulder not far away. Just as the young generation of the Xia family was ready to watch Yili embarrass himself, at this very moment. Yili activated the heavenly spirit eyes, a golden spiritual attack shot out from his eyes and struck the huge boulder nearby. Boom! The golden spiritual attack struck the boulder, and the massive stone turned into dust. How was that possible? The young generation of the Xia family watched in astonishment as the entire scene unfolded before their eyes. They couldn't have imagined this even if they used all their strength. The entire process happened so quickly that they didn't even see how Yili did it. All they remembered was that a golden spiritual attack shot out from Yili's eyes. Could it be, he really turned the big boulder into dust with his eyes? They couldn't believe it, they really couldn't. Wait! Golden spiritual attack. At the same time, the young generation of the Xia family thought of a terrifying possibility. They stared at Yili in shock. Golden spiritual energy only belonged to an SSS tier genetic warrior. Their eyes widened to the largest they had ever been in their lives, and they dared to swear that they had never been this shocked before. Now they understood that everything Yili had said was true. Just a moment ago, they had mocked Yili, but now they wished they could find a hole to hide in. The huge boulder turned to dust, and the sound traveled quite far. Everyone in the Xia family heard the loud noise and rushed out to investigate. What's going on? A middle-aged man shouted from afar. Chapter 359, This is Mystic Iron Stone. The young generation of the Xia family quickly made way, and even without turning around, they knew who was shouting. It was the head of the Xia family, an 8th-tier evolved being, Xia Hong. Xia Hong, along with several elders from the Xia family, emerged from the hall, with Xia Chun and Xia Shi by his side. Master, he turned that large stone into dust with his eyes, a young man said to Xia Hong. As soon as these words were spoken, both Xia Hong and the others were left dumbfounded. Xia Hong immediately looked in the direction of the big boulder. But what remained there was nothing but a pile of dust. Seeing this, Xia Hong's pupils contracted rapidly. That was mystic iron stone. He had gone to great lengths to obtain that mystic iron stone, and it had turned into dust? Who did this, who? Xia Hong angrily demanded. It was him, master, a young man quickly pointed at Yili. Xia Hong turned his gaze toward Yili, and for a moment, he was taken aback. You? Xia Hong remembered Yili from their encounter in the Falling Rock mountain range. He had never expected Yili to come from the wilderness zone to the Sky Blue Base City. He still clearly recalled how arrogant Yili had been when they met in the wilderness. But now, wait. Xia Hong suddenly thought of something. Someone had just told him that Yi Li had turned his mystic iron stone into dust using his eyes. This couldn't be possible. Even an 8th-tier evolved being like Xia Hong, even if he were to die, wouldn't dare to believe that someone could turn a huge mystic iron stone into dust with his eyes. He had never even heard of such a thing. I didn't expect that, Master Xia Hong. Your hard-earned mystic iron stone has turned into dust. What a pity, a 7th-tier evolved being said to Xia Hong. This 7th-tier evolved being wasn't a member of the Xia family but rather from the Gu family, one of the 8 families in the Sky Blue Base City. When Yi Li first met Xia Shi, she had told Xia Chun that she was in big trouble. The reason was that the Gu family's genetic warrior had come to the Xia family with only one purpose. That was to propose marriage between the Gu family's young master, Gu Bai, and Xia Shi. Unfortunately, Xia Shi had never liked Gu Bai. It was nothing more than a family arrangement, and the events that had happened in the Falling Rock mountain range had made Xia Shi completely see through what kind of person Gu Bai was. Xia Hong's anger flared up even more when he heard this. He glared at Yi Li and demanded, "How did you turn my mystic iron stone into this? Didn't someone just tell you?" "I use my eyes." "Could it be that you're suffering from senility?" Yi Li's face showed a playful expression. With this remark, Xia Hong froze like he had turned into stone. As an 8th-tier evolved being and the head of the Xia family, he had never heard anyone speak to him in such a manner. The Xia family members were all left looking at each other because they thought Yi Li was extremely arrogant for daring to speak to their master this way. Yi Li hadn't even finished speaking when the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family spoke to him. "Brat, who do you think you are? How dare you speak to Master Xia Hong like this?" The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yi Li disdainfully. Yi Li was slightly stunned when he heard that. He thought to himself, even if it doesn't rain, there will be dog pea moss. What should I say about you? Yi Li looked at the Tier 7 evolved being and said slowly. The 7th-tier evolved being was shocked. He clearly didn't understand what Yi Li meant. "Brat, what do you mean?" The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yi Li. Yi Li thought for a moment and then said to the 7th-tier evolved being with a faint smile, "Have you ever heard the saying, those who create their own problems deserve it?" Yi Li suddenly asked. The Xia family members were puzzled by this question, but the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family, upon hearing it, widened his eyes. "How do you know?" he quickly asked. Before Yi Li could answer, the 7th-tier evolved being thought of a shocking possibility. "Was it you who injured little Bai?" The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yi Li. "He Li. I just gave him a lesson to let him know that there are some people he shouldn't provoke," Yi Li replied with a smile. Yi Li had pierced through Gu Bai's arm with his one yang finger. He had also pierced the arms of several 5th-tier evolved beings from the Gu family. What was the difference between this and provoking the entire Gu family? The Gu family had frantically searched for Yi Li's whereabouts in Sky Blue Bay City, but by then, Yi Li had already gone to Jiang City. The 7th-tier evolved being had never dreamed that the person who had provoked the Gu family was right in front of him. "Ha ha ha." Suddenly, the 7th-tier evolved being burst into laughter, his face twisted with anger. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.